Yep.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for hanging in there and until our last session of the day here. Dare I say, we saved the best for last. So I'm actually going to start sharing my screen. I only have one slide here. I'll just say a few quick words before we get into the thick of our discussion here. Welcome to our session. I'd like to consider this to be a roundtable discussion of sorts, where we're going to be talking about AI in the context of information literacy, collaborating for success. So, just to give everybody some context as to what we're going to be talking about today, the first bullet point I have here is probably completely unnecessary to have. We've been talking about this all day, how there's an increasing demand for skills in the appropriate use of artificial intelligence, also known as AI literacy. So, this is a term that's come up multiple times throughout the day so far. And a lot of you are probably aware of this, but some of you probably aren't. So AI, last year, or in this past year or so, has been added as a recommended topic of instruction for first year seminar courses that are being developed here at Hack. So this is kind of a subtopic that's been nested under the larger topic of information literacy. And this was approved by Academics House and Faculty Senate Cabinet. I think it was around late last year, early this year, along with the new learning outcomes for first year seminar courses. So, kind of as a result of this and in preparation for this, some of the faculty here at Hack and faculty librarians have begun to collaborate to teach students these valuable AI literacy skills with some hands-on activities that encourage thoughtful use and critical evaluation of AI. Again, so I think this kind of wraps in really nicely to what we've all been talking about so far today. And now we can kind of see some practical examples of how this is happening here at Hack. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. Here we go. Okay. Uh, so we have several librarians and faculty collaborators that we're going to be hearing from today. So I figured we could just kind of start out first of all by kind of going around to each pair,
Yes.
if the two of you are here today, and just kind of tell us
Yes, that's
about your
pretty much
AI
what it is.
related
Yep.
activity or assignment, uh, how your collaboration with a librarian became to be, and sort of what were the learning outcomes associated with your activity or assignment. So I'm going to throw these questions in the chat just to kind of keep everyone on the same page of what we're talking about here. And like I said, for those of you who have collaborated with the librarian, for those of you who are in the room, we're just going to start by kind of letting everybody share a little bit about their assignment or their activity or their lesson and what they've done. And then I imagine the conversation will probably flow pretty naturally after that, but I do have some other questions to kind of guide us along just in case that's needed. So, with that being said, why don't I start with who I'm seeing on my screen first, which is my colleague Irene Rainville. So, um, Irene has been teaching sections of English 003. Um, Initially, I'm not even sure when this was. She reached out to me, I think at some point last year, maybe even the year before that.
Yeah,
You
two
probably have
years
a better
ago.
idea, Irene.
Yeah.
And we kind of chatted about, what can we do to, just give students a really basic introduction to AI.
Mhm.
Um, so I came up with a sort of mini lesson, so to speak, um, dealing with really just, basic AI literacy skills. And so, I think our approach, we didn't create collaborate on an assignment in the typical sense, but we kind of had this like tag team approach. It works hand in hand with the lesson that, or for the assignment that you have your students do, which is the KWL chart. So I'll turn it over to you, Irene, and if you'd be willing to share a little bit about the assignment, kind of how it works hand in hand with what we do here.
Sure. So we met Katie, I think probably a couple years ago, and AI is just something I've been interested in, even off school campus, so to speak. And of course, when I started reading more and more about AI coming through Chronicles of Higher Education, Faculty Focus, all that kind of stuff, I'm like, I really need to know more about it. And so about that time, Katie, you've been with our school like maybe 3 years now, four, but
Only
Katie,
two.
only two. All right, so it's got to be 2 years ago. She came to me and said, and I said to her, "Well, I'm really interested in AI. Do you guys have anything?" And she said, "Funny thing, I'm going to some type of librarian symposium and doing a presentation on AI." So that's kind of where, we started. She didn't use the exact same presentation, but was able to create this great PowerPoint and talking points for us in class. My students are developmental ed, a lot of times first class or one of the first classes that students take at Hack. And it's just something I felt like they really needed to know. And Katie really came through with something that they could connect to. I started, like she said, with very basic. KWL chart is basically what do you know? What do you want to know? And what did you learn? So initially in class, I talked with the students. I put them in little collaborative groups and said, talk about what you already know and what would you like to learn about AI. And so they discussed that and then they wrote it down as well. Then when Katie came in to present, it was about a 30-minute, maybe 40-minute at most presentation. I had them take notes, and then they had to also write down, of course, what did they learn, and then they talked also with their fellow students on what they might have missed or what did other people learn. So it was interesting for the disparate, shall we say. I had people that had not even thought about AI, and then I have the computer geek people who were way ahead of me, in AI. So I think that's the cool part of having your students share what they know already about AI. So generative AI versus regular AI, Katie did a great deal of explanation on that. She showed my classes how AI could be totally wrong because there's a lot of places where, as we know, AI creates its own stuff called hallucinations, and my students had no clue. I actually caught one of my students doing that because we do this small little bright research paper on A Secret Life of Bees, the book topic. And they're supposed to come up with a quote from the book that's related to their topic. And this quote literally did not exist in the book. So then I, just talked with the student and yeah, they had used ChatGPT to come up with their paragraph. So that being said, let's see, what else did you want, Katie? That's how my assignment kind of went. Now, I every semester I kind of update it. So this semester I'm going to try this. We'll see how it goes. I'm going to have them submit their little 3 paragraph paper on what do they know, what do they want to know, and what did they learn. They're going to submit it to ChatGPT, but I have a very specific entry that they're going to put in there. If you scroll down to the next page, maybe. Oh, maybe you don't have the second page.
Yeah, I'm showing the old version,
Oh,
so I pulled
yeah.
up your
Okay.
LibGuide that
Yeah.
we
So this semester, I put a,
yeah.
a grading rubric on the second page, and it's only a 50 pointer now. It used to be 25, but I upped it because now I'm teaching it a little bit longer. So they are going to compare their first draft with the Chat GPT version. But what I have, let's see if I can read it real quick. I don't think I have it on my screen or I'd share it. So basically, I have the wording and everything for them. So, like I said, this is very basic. You're a copy editor. You're tasked with improving the punctuation, grammar, and spelling of the following writing sample with minimal changes in wording. When you're done, please give me a list of the punctuation, spelling, and grammar you fixed in a bulleted list. So we're going to talk about how if you're specific with ChatGPT, it will be specific for you. So then we're going to compare the two. I'm going to have them meet again in small groups and talk about, all right, how did this do? Do you feel like it did a good job? It didn't do a good job? Because what I find in my classes when they are doing research, when they're doing writing, they feel like their grammar's not good, their spelling's not good. So if they're going to use ChatGPT, Grammarly, those type of things, then that's what they're going to use it for. So, yeah, is that enough?
Yeah, that was great. I've just been
Okay.
showing some things on the screen, just as you were
Yeah.
talking. So I pulled up your class
Thank
LibGuide
you.
here, your library guide.
Oh, you're too good.
And so this has your assignment on, as well
Hmm.
as my presentation was, which, kind of goes hand in hand with it.
Right.
And again, these are just, I'm trying to make this a little bit bigger here. I don't have to go off the page. Um, so again, this is just, designed for very basic, like intro to AI/AI
Mhm.
literacy skills. So, um, when this started, the students weren't doing too much hands-on work yet. So I think the fact that you've incorporated some more hands-on practice with it, is going to be really great. And so, but I'm just skimming through the slides here. Again, this is designed to be very basic, but I feel like we've gotten some good feedback. The students, seem very
Mhm.
engaged in the topic. And I do feel like even just knowing a little bit more about it helps them to think a little bit more critically. Um, so I'm
Right.
going to stop sharing again, and I'm going to move on to one of our other collaborator pairs here. So, Corinne, I see you in the audience. I wasn't sure if we had Jackie with us as well, but I know you worked with Jackie,
Yes, I'm
Jackie
not
Wilt.
seeing her either, and I wasn't sure. She might have something else going on today, but I can talk about it for both of us. Jackie and I have worked together for over a decade, which ages both of us just a teensy bit here at Hack. But this most recent semester, she approached me with kind of a new take on her traditional assignment. She wanted to try something new. And she specifically wanted to do, can you see my whole screen or just my bar?
Just your bar.
I knew that was happening and I don't know why it's doing that. Let me share my whole desktop and then you guys can see everything. All right. So it's English 003, and because she wanted to really work on the reading aspect, um, and she wanted her students to not so much emphasize the writing, obviously, also thinking about that, but focusing on the relaying their comprehension of the reading on the topic. So she chose to have them do a textbook chapter on a topic. And we talked about different learning outcomes what that we wanted for our session. She has me come to 3 classes. So really what we wanted them to get out of this was understanding that AI is acceptable as a tool to help them with their research, but not as a way to, create their text. Um, and one of the things we talked about is how it's really difficult for students to know how to interact about a topic with the databases when they don't even have like a base understanding of the overall topic. Um, and a lot of times for assignments, we've seen it year after year after year, and there's nothing wrong with this, but step one, create the outline, which, we all do for our own teaching and things like that. But when they don't even have a basic understanding of that outline, it's really a struggle for them to even come up with an outline. So we started with them understanding how to choose a topic. And because their topics were specific, she gave them a list that they were supposed to choose from. Only one person chose something else that she ran past the professor and she was fine with. So I provided them with some background reading on all of their topics. But what I also did, and you notice a nice little cat down here that's not on all of our LibGuides, I created a custom chat bot that I trained with information about some of these topics, as well as her assignment and a list of our databases and some other, information that was available. And then I did a few interactions with it to train it. So ultimately, what I told students to do is to look at these to learn a little bit about each of these topics, and then to they can use this to come up with some outlines for their topic. So a student could come in here and they could type in, human rights in Afghanistan, and it created an outline based on what sections she wanted, which were these where and when and key people, causes, key events, after effects. And it says right here, this is the topic, it's what it focuses on. Here's what you got to do. Um, and this was created with a free thing on Jotform. And I will show you some of those interactions. I starred some of them so that they were easy to pull out some good examples. So I'm going to go to the oldest one because that's the one that was during class. So this is the student who chose the opioid crisis as opposed to all the other things. But it was basically kind of a start, and they went with that. And it says, I recommend checking out academic databases like EBSCOhost and Hack Library resources. So, and not a great thing, but she also didn't really kind of approach it because I gave them the instructions that this was for creating the outline and coming up with research terms. So this one, they kind of copied and pasted from the assignment, which, let's be honest, we all know students do. Anytime they go into any kind of chat, we man our library's chat, and there's so many times where we see they just copy and paste something from the assignment and think that we can just magically help. But so this kind of gave a very generic outline. But then the student went and copied some text, and I don't know where they got this text. But it was about, the thing. And here it gives an outline based on the text that they copied and pasted. And they asked to make an outline for more specific stuff. And it keeps spitting out outlines. This one, create an outline on why the Eastern State Penitentiary closed. And it gives the outline and some subheadings because she wanted each of their textbook chapters to have headings and subheadings because that was one of the reading strategies that they were focusing on. So this one gave a little bit more help than we would have typically liked, but I included this example because it gave very basic information, and I had given the instruction to the chatbot to not write for them. So this one went a little further than I would have liked. So I planned on going back and tweaking that to say, like, if they ask about something, like, no more than one sentence. This person got a little more specific again, but it also tells them some keywords and databases to try. And then clicking back here real quick for research the information on your topic. I told them, like, again, you're not using the AI chatbots to do the research, but use it to come up with some keywords because often students don't know these phrases like Boolean search and things like that. So we talked about giving it a prompt and things like that. And I had examples of like when AI goes askew because I created several images using the exact same thing. I said, regenerate, regenerate, regenerate. And only like 2 times did it actually come up with an image that said, ask a librarian on a sign. It was mostly misspelled and all kinds of things. So I explained to them that they could use these tools and kind of the pluses and minuses, or they could also use this, what I called Whiskers research thing. So here you have, this person, they did this again. And I will say I was very proud of how it deciphered what they actually meant. Like this one said Purdue Pharma and Sackler family, and they're like, no, the Sackler family is what they mean. And then they came up with some phrases. This one, they said, explore those topics, and it comes up with keywords, suggests some databases, and then it says, you want me to suggest a structured outline? And they're like, yeah. Can you give me databases terms for this? And it gives them some terms. This one, it talks about like the cultural aspect. And it's like, can you give me another topic? Like it wants to focus on something. It's like, how about another one? Try outlining this. Yes, let's do that. And it creates the outline for them. I don't know what they meant by give me a reissues backing this up, but it said for research it, use academic sources, and it'll provide some things. Again, help with keywords and sources. So you can see not only were they using it in the way that I intended for them to use it for outlines and for keywords and things like that. One of the students actually typed in, I was so proud of them, I need a Boolean search to use in a library database for research on Native American genocide. And they did this. And I showed them the difference between what came back from here and each of the different ones when you asked them that. And then they had to include visuals, which I gave tips on, and writing the chapter, which the templates and things like that. But really what it came down to was we wanted them to have that framework for their investigations. And, I hate to speak for Jackie, but since she's not here, I did talk to her after the fact, and she was so thrilled with the outcome. She thought that what she was actually getting from the students was much better than any of the AI garbled information she got from other semesters. She even had students, gave them the extra credit opportunity to kind of present about their experience using the AI. And as most people know, only a few took her up on that offer. But she said that they were so happy that they were not only told how to use AI, but given some help in terms of coming up with a context to use it and how it works and understanding that. And they thought it was a really helpful assignment overall in terms of preparing them for those future classes.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing, Corinne. I'm sure that folks might have some questions for you, but in the interest of letting everybody, giving everyone some time, we'll try to get to those at the end. So we're going to switch gears now, and I'm going to turn to who I see next, which is Shannon Davis, who I know worked with my colleague Andrea Hartrandt for Science 100. So Shannon.
Thank you. So Andrea has been an embedded librarian in my Science 100 course for quite a while now. And she's been supporting information literacy in the terms of their research project, which one of the learning outcomes is to locate, evaluate, and credit research sources. So we added this AI component to it where they are using AI to help them generate a thesis statement. So in this first year seminar course, when you ask them to, come up with a research topic and then give you a thesis statement, and then they do a presentation, they really don't know how to develop a thesis statement. So through this assignment, the outcome of the thesis statements have been greatly improved. I did share this morning that my first iteration of this assignment wasn't the greatest. However, going back and, looking at it again and making tweaks as we go has been very helpful. So here is the LibGuide that Andrea has created for the course, and it helps them with their research. And you can see here in step 4 is where they are using AI, and this is where they're going to create their thesis statement. So it's just some basic background information like others have shown, but then it talks specifically about developing their prompt. So helping them to really generate a prompt that's going to help them to get the output that they desire. And then I'm going to stop sharing this and switch to my actual assignment. So I actually tilted my assignment. I know this is small. I don't know if I can make it bigger. So basically, they're using their AI tool, whichever one they choose, to help them develop a prompt. So they're going to ask their AI tool to give them 3 thesis statements based on whatever prompt they gave it. But then, and this is where that whole critical thinking and synthesizing information comes in, where they are going to evaluate those statements. And they're evaluating it based on relevance, the clarity, the depth, and also bias. So I'm asking them to, reflect, think critically about that output that was generated by AI. And then they can take those statements that were generated by AI, thinking about their comments that they made, their evaluation of those statements, and then develop their own thesis statement from that. So then I'm asking them to submit the document that shows their actual process. And this is one of the major things that I changed, because I was getting a variety of garbled mess before I gave them a template, which I think I have that here. Yeah. So then I gave them this template to submit their assignment. So, many of them might have given me their research topic and their final thesis statement, but they missed kind of all the steps in between. So by giving them this template, it shows, I want to know, what was your prompt? I want to know, what were those original statements? And, tell me how you evaluated them. How did you change it? And how did you come to your final statement? So through this collaboration with Andrea, I think what we're seeing as our end products in their research presentation, specifically with their thesis statements, are much improved. And as others have stated, I think students really appreciate the instruction on how to effectively use AI. How should we be using it? How can we generate prompts that are going to give us the output that we desire? So that's all I have.
All right, great. Thank you. So we have one more duo left, and I'm not sure if it's a duo, but we have, well, at least one person here is able to speak. Jess Garner and Caroline Mellinger worked together for history on a history assignment. I know that you two have talked about this assignment before, but I think you might have made some tweaks, maybe learned some new things since first talking about it. So, Jess, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. So yes, we first got into this by she reached out to me when I first started actually at Hack in the spring of 2023, and it was for the history classes, and she was looking for information literacy to sit alongside her assignments and kind of get the students into the assignments and kind of have them working with the material she uses, which is primary sources. And because they're primary sources, they can be harder sometimes for students to really engage with. The difference between a primary and secondary source. So when we're looking at primary sources, and this is something created during the time period, not only is there often a barrier with sort of the language and just the context of it, but also just the division between this is something created at the time and how you engage with that versus a secondary source. So that's how we first started. And as we were working with things, ChatGPT was gaining speed, so we decided to implement that. And our very early kind of iterations of it were a little clunky because we were combining it with a lot of information literacy things as well. And what we quickly realized was, I think that the ChatGPT and the AI parts actually helped a lot with some of the context issues for the students. So This is kind of the early, what we first set out. We set out 3 different assignments that sat along the article cycles. So she would have the students reading and sort of looking at a certain section of history, and we would have the information literacy assignment set before it. So this is the second one, it's set before the 3rd cycle. The first one was set for the first, so they first got into it, and we talked about primary versus secondary. The second information literacy assignment, we decided to incorporate the Chat GPT and just basically introduce them to the idea of authority and why is something right credible or not. And that became sort of the key to getting into the 3rd assignment, which ended up being the one we sort of have focused on afterwards. And the big, that's the wrong one there. The big reason for that is because we found that one of the big concepts, of course, when you're looking at primary sources, is bias. And going in and trying to explain bias to students, I mean, there's a lot of really good YouTube videos, but they are not particularly useful when you're actually working with materials that are not what they're talking about. It can just be very hard for students kind of wrap their head around the idea of what bias is versus perspective, because perspective is just where you're sitting, but bias is a very different thing. And what we found is that with Chat GPT, and then later we also worked with Google, it was originally Bard, but then Gemini, is that it actually gave us really great information about these primary sources most of the time. So the students got to use the Chat GPT to go in and actually get information out of it. And it was answering some of the questions that she had in her course, but it became really useful because then the students were able to do that for the later questions. So it was one of those, it was very much embedded into the material that she was already teaching. And unfortunately, she's not here to kind of go into depth about how that works on the other end of it. I see it a little bit, but I don't engage as much on that end. But it is a very useful tool to get students to kind of look at credibility. And we did layer in a lot of different, let's see if I can find it there, different resources for the students on just different, this is of course a very early one, but articles and videos on sort of credibility and bias and how Chat GPT actually works. So, and the students actually were very engaged with that in particular because many of them, you know, they don't really understand how it works. They're not sure, you know, what it's doing on the back end of it and why not only is it wrong sometimes, so we did have some fun examples of that, and it's hallucinating. And it will actually hallucinate with primary sources as well, which I found very interesting. So even if you're looking for a very particular piece of history, it will make things up that do not exist. So, but it will also kind of go into the ethics of, you know, is this good or not, just because it's biased as well. So we're talking about bias within these historical documents, but we're also looking at it in Chat GPT. So I think that's the way this is sort of kind of, we're leaning more towards that because we found that that is such kind of a hard concept for students. And honestly, AI does a really good job of explaining it just by example. And then the students also get, you know, sort of the background of why does AI create the things it does in the same kind of, in the same breath. So it is an interesting thing to kind of vary. I think that this in particular sits very nicely on top of the resources that are already being taught, history being very content heavy. It can be a little onerous, I think, sometimes for students just to get all of that and then have to teach some skill sets as well. But this gave them something to kind of go outside of and look at, which was really nice. So, yeah.
All right, thank you for sharing, Jess. So I have some additional questions that I could ask everyone who was so generous to share. But first, I think I'll open it up to the room to see if, anybody has questions for any of the our lovely colleagues that we've heard from. So I know it's earlier than 10 minutes out, but I figured we heard a lot of interesting stuff. So if anybody has any questions, I'll pause for a moment. Okay, so perhaps we're all still processing. So one question that I have, and I'll just pose this to everybody who was willing to share. What were your ethical considerations in developing an activity or assignment that uses AI, especially for those of you who've done sort of in-depth hands-on activities? And did you share those considerations with students in any way? So, whoever would like to share an answer, please. Corinne?
Yeah, I figured I'd use the hand raise feature. So one of the things that, I mentioned to the instructor, I was like, in training this, can I upload your assignment? And she was perfectly okay with that. But that is something that, I think it's important to note that the materials that you do use to train it, you have permission to do so when creating the custom chat. And I figured that I was okay with my own permission to use my stuff. So and like there's some stuff that I'm like, I'm pretty sure I don't need permission to you for, pretty common knowledge on topics. So like if it could easily be a Wikipedia article on the topic, I'm gonna be okay with that. But the other aspect was I made sure to point out to students that when they used the one I created, it wasn't collecting their information in a way that could be connected to them. And I did emphasize that, I can see what you ask, which means that, if your instructor says, I think they might have used this for, plagiarism, despite me training it to and telling it not to give them, things and tell it like, can you write it for me? And saying no, that we can review what they asked it and what answers were given. So just knowing, I think that little bit of checking was available helped prevent that. Now it may have just driven them to do it in other sources. But we did talk about how, if you go to Gemini or things like that and you're asked to sign in, it's going to ask you um, to log in and it does get connected to you. So there's a little bit of making them aware of what kind of things they should be concerned about, and recognizing how they feel about it.
Jess?
Yeah, that was definitely one of the things because we were doing it, with ChatGPT to begin with. It was definitely a consideration because you have to sign in to be able to input anything. So we actually just gave them, because of course, when we're talking about how does this work, we talked about the fact that it will be learning from everything you put in and it will be logging that it is from you because it's attached. And so we gave them an out. So we had some pre-generated responses for the students to work with because eventually they were also doing some fact checking on the materials as well. So they needed to engage more in depth than just even the smaller bit. So we had to do some workups on that. And it was very interesting to see how uh, the different generators actually functioned with that and how they learned from it very quickly or not. But that was definitely a consideration because not all the students wanted to engage with the AI. There were some that were very adamantly opposed. So.
Anybody else want to add anything on that note? If not, I'll add. Irene, this was something I think I want to bring up. Um, with your classes, if I teach them again with our basic AI literacy lesson, I noticed that even if you do log into ChatGPT, in a nicest way because you have more control over your settings. So if you are logged into ChatGPT, I wouldn't say it's the easiest thing to find, but you can go into settings and they have well, maybe I can just show it really quickly here um, for anybody who's not aware of this. So if you click on your account icon and go to settings, they have this category called data controls. And so this one is kind of the big one, like it's on by default, and it doesn't really give you any sort of notification or heads up about it. But this setting improved the model for everyone. So you can actually turn that off, and that turns off the setting that, by default, you're allowing your content to be used to train the different ChatGPT models. So you can actually go in and turn that off before you start interacting with the tool. And there's some other settings here. You can set it to delete all chats after you're done, archive chats, things of that nature. So this is something that I'm going to start pointing out more just to, make everyone aware because it's so easy once you open this to, just dive right in and kind of, just be very direct with what you want. So that's something I'd like to bring up more. Um, Anybody else have any other questions that they thought of for our panelists? Jump back to my list here. So a few of you have touched on this, but I'm curious to know a little bit more. Just what has the reception been like from students with these assignments? Have they been very receptive? Have they been more engaged? Have they given you any feedback? And kind of what does that feedback look like? Um, so, Corinne, I see your hand again.
Yeah, so I will say from my perspective, um I had more students from that class reach out to me for appointments and help with that assignment more than any other class I have ever taught. And I think it was because, and it wasn't always necessarily with specific aspects of it, but they were like, oh, this person is doing all this for us, maybe they'll help me a little more. And I was like, yeah, I will. Um, so that was one thing. And they seemed to really like the idea that because we did emphasize at the beginning, like, we know you have a lot of work. We know you have all of this. And we know that you coming up out of thin air with an outline for this is really challenging. And that's not the point of this assignment. So we wanted to kind of take that mental load off of them. And they really felt the difference in terms of like, oh, you mean you're going to let me use this to create the outline and I just have to like fill it in with words I write? And we're like, yeah. And they're like, oh, here I am using this to help me organize my thoughts or, give me an organization in which to put my thoughts. So it really kind of took that drain of not knowing where to start from them. So Shannon?
I think that using the AI assignment for Science 100 had an increase in the number of students who were actually submitting a thesis statement. So before they had this tool to assist them, they may submit their outline without a thesis statement. So I think I saw an increase in number of thesis statements that were submitted. And I already mentioned that the thesis statements were much improved as well. And I think we know that students are using AI, but so feedback I received from students is that they appreciated having that general background information about the model, just some basic information about like what even is AI, because most students are just using it. They don't really know what it is. And also and again, it was really introductory level, but basically, how do I use this? How can I make AI work for what I want to? So, with kind of the information on generating the prompt, I know students found that very helpful and were appreciative of that information.
Irene, you're muted. Still muted. There you go.
Sorry, I was saying totally agree with my colleagues. But like I said, mine was pretty basic. But my students were so appreciative of knowing. They're very scared of plagiarizing. So when they come into reading three, they're like, I don't know what I can copy or can't copy. Can I go to Grammarly? Can I not go to Grammarly? So I think just doing this little AI module or whatever you want to call it really helped clarify for them. I have a syllabus statement, very basic that we go over at the beginning of the semester. And then I use, similar to what the speaker this morning presented, the different levels of assessment of AI. And we talk about those. And so when I assign this little KWL thing, they know that they can do, up to this level. This is what we're going to look at. And so there's, I think, a lot more clarity on their part. But what I find interesting is most of my students would tell us up front or tell me up front that using AI is cheating. I mean, almost 100%. They'll say AI is cheating. And so I am trying to show them that, if the professor is telling them, hey, you can, use it to come up with a thesis statement or explore background information or whatever, that's not cheating, but you need to go, of course, by what your professor says. So some of my students always have to comment. They do a lot of reflection type stuff after they write. And so a couple of the things that they said last semester, it says AI should not do your work for you. Instead, it should aid you in your work, giving ideas, clarifying a word or sentence. So that's as far basically as I've gone. I have not gone as far as some of, the history and all of that, which I find amazing that you're way far ahead of what I'm doing in my class. But let's see, using AI in college can be helpful in ways to get information, but it's not good to think AI is always going to be correct. And then it seems useful when needing grammar, vocabulary to help spice up your text. But other than that, you are in college to learn and be original, not to have AI complete your work for you. So kind of interesting that, like I said, this is sort of an introductory course, getting my students ready for reading, writing, college level. And I just feel like this little mini lesson that Katie helped develop just really nails it.
Yeah, so I did a quick screen share to show that AI assessment scale that you plan on incorporating, Irene, because I don't know if I've seen this before that you shared it with me. So I really like it. I think it's a very useful tool. So I'll try to get a link to that here in a second. Jess, I think I saw your hand first.
I just wanted to note that as we've done this more, and we're 2 years in now, I found students being more and more comfortable using it, I think, from the outgo. So I'm very happy that other people are also incorporating it, because I think it's one of those, like, the more everybody can say, here's how you use it, or you use it in this way, it becomes just more comfortable for the students to use generally. And I'm finding less students who are just nervous from the get-go. And so that's been really great to see. And it's also allowed me to kind of go a little bit further with some of the other aspects of it, which is great. So,
Corinne.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on what Irene had said, and it's one of the things that I lead with almost every class. I like to emphasize to students that they're not here in college to show us that they already know everything. They're here to show us what they learned. And part of that, especially with the English 003, where there's such an emphasis on showing reading comprehension, like you're here to show us that you read this and understood it. We're not here to say like, you read this, like, and we're just, trusting that you read it and understood it. And now we want you to craft this amazing PhD level, work of art as your research assignment. We want to see what you have learned. And I think that helps too, in terms of kind of easing that anxiety of, I don't want to plagiarize, all that. I'm like, that's good, because we want to know what you think, not what AI thinks, not what your grandma thinks, not what this person who wrote about it thinks, unless, that's the point, to like look at what they thought versus they thought and things like that. Like, we want you to start thinking on your own, and we want you to show that.
All right. Well, I think that those are excellent comments to kind of start wrapping things up. I'll pause for a few more seconds just to see if anybody else has any last questions. Or faculty librarians. I did see that our department chair, Kathleen Heidecker, put a link in the chat if you'd like to make an appointment with a librarian to discuss your ideas, discuss your needs, and how we can work with you, incorporate AI into information literacy assignments, or really anything having to do with any research that you have your students do. Please continue to reach out to us, and we'll be happy to brainstorm and happy to help. If nobody has anything else to add, then I really thank everybody for joining us today. I hope everybody has a safe commute home if you've driven today, and has a great rest of the afternoon. Thank you, everybody.
I don't think we need the microphone at this point.
Yeah, but thank you again to our presenters, and tomorrow is department and school meeting day.
Yes, it is.